The snow was falling in thick, whispering sheets, swallowing every sound except the crack of frozen branches underfoot. 10-year-old Emma stumbled through the woods, her red scarf dragging behind her like a wounded flag. She'd followed something, a shimmer, a flicker of gold in the distance that danced between the trees like it wanted to be found. Now she wasn't so sure it had been real. Her breath came in clouds, sharp and uneven. The light was fading fast, the forest around her bleeding into shades of gray and silence. Somewhere, far off, an owl called once and then went still. She clutched her mittened hands to her chest, trying to remember which way was home. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. It was soft at first, almost human, a whimper, fragile and broken. Emma froze. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "Never wander too far, and if you hear something cry, don't answer. The woods have ways of tricking lonely hearts." But the sound came again, clearer this time. A short, choked cry. Emma took a careful step forward, then another. Her boots sank deep into the snow, leaving small craters behind her. She pushed past a fallen pine, its branches heavy with frost, and there, beneath the curve of an old boulder, she saw it. A bobcat cub. Its fur was matted with ice, one paw caught in a rusted trap. Blood bloomed against the snow, dark and spreading. The cub lifted its head weakly, and in that moment, Emma forgot to breathe. Those eyes, amber and wide, met hers, and for a heartbeat, everything else vanished. Fear should have come first. It didn't. What came instead was something else, something deeper. She dropped to her knees, snow soaking through her jeans, and whispered, "Hey, it's okay." The bobcat didn't move. Its chest rose and fell in small, trembling bursts. Emma looked around for help, but the forest was empty. The world had narrowed down to her, the wounded creature, and the quiet hush of falling snow. She reached out a hand. Her mitten brushed its fur, rough and cold. The animal flinched, a faint growl rising from its throat, but it didn't strike. It didn't even try to run. Its eyes held hers with a strange, unspoken question. "Why aren't you afraid?" "I won't hurt you," she said softly. "I promise." The trap groaned as she touched it, metal biting into her gloves. She pulled once, twice, teeth gritted against the cold. When it finally snapped open, the cub jerked free, collapsing into the snow with a quiet whine. Emma wrapped her scarf around its injured leg without thinking, her small hands trembling. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Child and wild thing, both lost, both trembling. The wind howled through the trees, and yet in that hollow sound, Emma felt something stirring, something she couldn't name. The cub blinked slowly, as if memorizing her face. Then it pressed its nose weakly against her palm, and Emma felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the sun. Far above them, the first stars began to pierce through the clouds. She didn't know it yet, but that night, the night she met the creature the town called cursed, was the night her life began to change forever. The cabin stood on the edge of the forest, like a memory refusing to fade. It was small, crooked in places, with smoke that never quite reached the sky before dissolving into mist. Inside, the air always smelled faintly of pine, wood ash, and the faint trace of cinnamon tea. Her mother's favorite. Emma sat by the window most mornings, chin resting on her knees, watching the snow settle on the fence posts. Her father, Jacob, moved quietly around the kitchen, the way people do when they've lived too long with silence. He used to hum when he cooked. Now he didn't. Every sound in the cabin felt too big for two people. The scrape of a chair, the sigh of the fire. Even Emma's whisper seemed to echo. Her mother's absence was everywhere. In the unplayed guitar by the door, the empty chair near the window, the photo half hidden behind a stack of old books. Emma never talked about it. Neither did Jacob. They just existed, two shadows orbiting the same wound. Jacob was a man carved by the mountains, broad-shouldered, quiet, his face mapped with lines of weather and grief. Before the accident, he'd been a forest ranger, known by everyone in the small town of Hollow Creek. After the blizzard took his wife, he left the post, packed what little they owned, and moved them deeper into the woods. "It's safer here," he'd said. But safety felt like another kind of prison. Emma would draw animals in her notebook, foxes, deer, wolves, and imagine them coming to life outside her window. Sometimes she dreamed of a wild cat walking through the snow, its eyes bright as candlelight. She didn't know why, but it made her feel less alone. Jacob saw the way she looked toward the forest. "Don't go wandering," he'd warn, his voice low but tired. "The woods aren't what they seem. Some things in there don't forgive." He said it like he believed the trees could remember. At night, when the wind pressed against the windows, Emma would lie awake listening. The sound reminded her of whispers, sad, restless, almost human. Once, she thought she saw a pair of glowing eyes watching from the tree line. She blinked, and they were gone. There were stories in Hollow Creek, the kind people told when the nights got long. They said a bobcat spirit roamed the mountain, part guardian, part curse. It appeared to those who were lost or grieving. Some claimed it led wanderers home. Others swore it lured them deeper into the dark. Emma didn't know which to believe. But sometimes, when the cold wind brushed her cheek, she imagined it was a sign, a message, something or someone trying to find her. One morning, she found a single paw print by the fence. Perfect. Fresh. It hadn't snowed all night. She pressed her small hand beside it. Her fingers fit almost exactly inside the mark. She looked toward the trees, and for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. By the time the sun dragged itself over the ridgeline, the woods around Hollow Creek had already fallen back into their endless hush. It was the kind of silence that made you feel like you were being watched, not by danger, but by time itself. The trees here were old, their trunks blackened and gnarled, their roots breaking through the snow like buried bones. Between them, faint trails twisted into places no map dared name. Jacob said those paths were made by animals. The old folks in town said otherwise. Emma loved the forest anyway. When her father went to chop wood, she would sneak to the edge of the clearing, listening to the distant drip of melting ice, the flutter of wings. She learned to read the snow, the way it folded over paw prints, the way the wind erased a trail like it was never there. Sometimes she would whisper to the air, pretending her mother could hear her. "Are you still out there?" she'd say softly. "Do you think the animals remember us?" One afternoon, while walking home from the frozen stream, Emma noticed something unusual. A pattern carved faintly into the snow near an old birch tree. 3 overlapping circles, drawn by something sharp. It looked deliberate, almost like a sign. She touched it with her mitten, and for a heartbeat, the wind died completely. When she told her father, he went pale. "That's just kids from town," he said too quickly. But there were no other children for miles. That night, the forest groaned with the sound of shifting ice. Jacob stood at the window long after Emma had gone to bed, lantern light flickering against his face. He looked toward the same tree line she'd been watching all winter, his jaw tight, his breath uneven. He thought he saw movement, a low, sleek shadow slipping between the trees. It wasn't the first time. For weeks, strange things had been happening near the cabin. Missing traps, prints that appeared and vanished overnight. The eerie feeling of eyes following from the dark. Jacob told himself it was just the mountain playing tricks. But sometimes, when he heard soft scratching at the door just before dawn, he would remember the legends. The guardian cat that watched over the lost. And the stories always began the same way. It chooses those who need it most. The next morning, the sky was heavy with snow again. Emma stepped outside to fetch water and froze mid-step. In the untouched whiteness before her, there was a trail, small, neat paw prints leading into the woods. Only this time, they didn't look like any animal she knew. The stride was too even, the path too straight, like something had been waiting for her to notice. She stood there, heart fluttering against her ribs, breath misting in the cold air. The forest seemed to hum softly, as if breathing with her. Emma turned back toward the cabin. Her father was chopping wood, his axe rising and falling, but his eyes flicked up just once, toward her, then toward the trees. Neither of them said a word, but both felt it, the quiet pull of something about to begin. The storm had rolled in without warning, gray clouds swallowing the mountaintops, the kind that made the world feel smaller, closer, dangerous. Emma was supposed to stay inside, but curiosity had always been louder than fear. She wrapped her red scarf tight around her neck and slipped out while her father was stacking wood behind the cabin. The snow was fresh and deep, muffling her steps. The air stung her cheeks, sharp and clean. The trail she followed began near the old birch tree, the one marked with the strange circles. Fresh paw prints dotted the snow, weaving between the trees, leading deeper into the woods. They were small, almost delicate, like a cat's. Emma's heart beat faster. She whispered, "Luna." A name she didn't know why she said, as if it had been waiting in her mouth for years. The forest was quiet except for the rhythmic sigh of falling snow. But then faintly, she heard it again. The same sound from that night. A cry, thin and desperate. Emma ran toward it, branches clawing at her sleeves. Her boots slipped, caught, but she didn't stop until she reached a small clearing half buried under ice. The sound came from beneath a rotting log. She crouched, brushed away the snow, and there it was. The bobcat cub, the same amber eyes, wide with pain and fear. Its paw was caught in another trap, cruel and tight. Blood dotted the snow like red seeds. The cub hissed weakly, its breath visible in the cold. Emma's throat tightened. Oh no, no, no. She dropped to her knees and reached for the trap, but the metal was frozen solid. The cub flinched, growling softly, but didn't pull away. Emma worked the latch with trembling fingers until her gloves tore. When it finally gave, she gasped in relief. The cub stumbled free, collapsing beside her. "You're okay," she whispered, pulling off her scarf and wrapping it around the injured paw. "You're okay now." The cub's eyes flicked up at her, and for a moment, the forest went still. Not silent, still. The air thickened, almost humming. Snowflakes hung suspended, as though the world was holding its breath. Emma reached out slowly and touched its fur. It was rough and warm beneath the ice. That's when she realized how small it was. Barely the size of a house cat, ribs visible under the fur. She could feel its heartbeat against her palm. frantic but steady. Then thunder cracked overhead. The cub startled, twisting in her arms. "It's all right," she said quickly, voice shaking. "I'll get you somewhere safe." Without thinking, she lifted it against her chest, ignoring the sting of its claws against her coat. The cub didn't fight her. It just trembled, eyes half closed, breath shallow. Emma turned toward the direction of home, but she couldn't tell where home was anymore. The snow had swallowed her tracks. The forest looked different now, darker, endless. For the first time, she felt fear creeping in, not of the animal, but of the silence pressing around them. A faint sound drifted through the trees, low, steady, like a growl too deep to belong to the cub in her arms. Something else was out there. She tightened her hold on the bobcat and whispered, "We have to move." And somewhere beyond the falling snow, something moved with them. The wind sharpened as Emma trudged through the snow, clutching the trembling bobcat cub to her chest. Every breath burned her lungs. The trees looked the same in every direction, twisting shadows under a white sky. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Behind her, something cracked, a branch snapping under weight. She turned, heart hammering, but saw nothing, just falling snow and the faint whisper of the wind. "Almost there," she murmured, though she had no idea where there was. The cub whimpered softly. She brushed its fur, trying to soothe it. The scarf she'd wrapped around its paw was soaked crimson now, but the bleeding had slowed. Its eyes, those strange, wild eyes, watched her with something that looked almost like trust. Emma pushed forward until she saw a familiar shape in the distance. The outline of the old hunting cabin, long abandoned, half collapsed under the weight of snow. She'd passed it once before with her father. He had told her never to go near it. "Bad things live where good men forget them," he'd said. But now it looked like salvation. She kicked the door until it gave way, the hinges shrieking. Inside, the air smelled of dust and rot, but it was dry. She laid the cub on a pile of old blankets and shut the door against the wind. "There," she whispered. "Safe." Her fingers were raw, numb, but she tore strips from her sleeve and tightened them around the scarf, making a rough bandage. The cub twitched once, then went still, its breathing shallow but steady. Emma stroked its head gently. Outside, the storm roared louder. Snow hurled itself against the cabin walls, howling like a living thing. The world had vanished beyond the frozen windows. Emma sat beside the cub, wrapping her arms around her knees. "You'll be okay," she said again, softer this time. "I'll come back tomorrow with food. I promise." As if understanding, the bobcat lifted its head and blinked at her, slow, deliberate like a nod. The fireless cabin felt almost warm for a moment, the kind of warmth that didn't come from heat, but from knowing you'd done something right, even if no one ever found out. She didn't hear her father calling her name miles away, his voice breaking through the storm. She didn't see the lantern light flickering through the trees as he searched, panic slicing through the dark. All she knew was the quiet rhythm of the cub's breathing, the faint weight of her own heartbeat echoing it. When she finally stood to leave, the storm had eased slightly. She tucked the torn edge of her scarf under the cub's head like a pillow. "I'll come back," she said again, pressing her palm to its side. "You'll see." The cub closed its eyes, a soft purr rumbling from its chest. It wasn't gratitude exactly. It was something deeper, older. Emma stepped outside into the cold, pulling her coat tight. The forest glowed faintly in the moonlight. every snowflake shimmering like dust from a dream. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she saw movement, two glimmering eyes watching her through the trees, bigger this time, older. But when she blinked, they were gone. She took one last look at the cabin before heading home, unaware that her single act of kindness had already rewritten the story of her life and of the creature she'd just saved. 3 days passed before Emma dared to return to the old cabin. The storm had cleared, leaving the forest buried in silence and light. The snow shimmered like powdered glass under the pale sun. She slipped away at dawn, carrying a basket filled with scraps of meat, a small flask of water, and her father's old blanket she'd stolen from the chest. When she pushed the door open, the air was thick with the smell of cold wood and faint life. The bobcat cub, she'd started calling it Luna, was still there, curled tightly in the corner. Its fur had dried, and when it lifted its head at the sound of her voice, Emma felt her heart swell. "Hey," she whispered, "I told you I'd come back." Luna blinked slowly, suspicious but not afraid. Emma knelt down and unwrapped the bandage. The wound had begun to scab, raw but healing. She poured water into a cracked tin bowl and pushed it closer. Luna hesitated before drinking, her small tongue flicking at the edge. "You're tough," Emma murmured, "like my dad." Then, after a pause, "But nicer." She spent the morning cleaning the cabin, sweeping out the snow, rearranging old crates into something like a bed. When she hummed softly, an old tune her mother used to sing, Luna's ears twitched. For the first time, Emma laughed. It echoed softly through the wooden walls. Outside, the forest creaked with life waking under the thaw. Somewhere in the distance, a raven called, sharp and clear. Day after day, she returned, sometimes with food, sometimes with nothing but stories. She talked about her schoolwork, about her mother's guitar, about how lonely the house felt when her father went quiet. Luna listened in that still, animal way, head tilted, amber eyes steady. Once, Emma reached out her hand, fingers trembling. Luna hesitated, muscles taut, then pressed her head against Emma's palm. The contact sent a warmth up her arm that made her eyes sting. It became their secret world, this hidden place where no rules reached, but secrets never stay hidden long. One evening, as Emma crept back home, Jacob was waiting by the door. His face was unreadable, lantern light throwing deep shadows across his jaw. "Where have you been?" he asked. She froze, clutching her coat. "Just walking," she lied. His eyes dropped to her boots, muddy, flecked with fur. "Walking where?" The silence stretched. Then he sighed, heavy and worn. "Emma, you can't keep wandering out there. It's not safe. A wild bobcat's been spotted near the valley. They kill livestock when they're hungry." Emma's breath caught. "Did it hurt anyone?" "Not yet," Jacob said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "But if it comes near the house, I'll have to deal with it." "Deal with it?" The words felt like ice sliding down her spine. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the fire's low crackle. Luna's face wouldn't leave her mind, the way she'd looked at her, trusting. Emma pressed her fists against her chest. "No one's hurting you," she whispered into the dark. The next morning, before sunrise, she ran back to the cabin. Luna greeted her with a low rumble. Not quite a growl, not quite a purr. Emma dropped to her knees, hugging the cub. "They don't understand you," she said. "But I do." Outside, snow began to fall again. Light, slow, and quiet, as if the world itself were listening. For the first time in months, Emma felt alive. The winter light grew weaker each day, stretching longer shadows across the forest. By now, Emma and Luna had fallen into a rhythm, like two hearts beating at the same uncertain pace. Every morning before school, Emma would sneak food into her satchel and slip into the trees. The old cabin had become her sanctuary, the one place where she could breathe. Luna was bigger now, stronger. Her fur had turned sleek, her steps surer. She would meet Emma at the clearing, appearing like a whisper from between the pines. Sometimes they played in the snow, chasing each other around fallen logs. Sometimes they just sat side by side, watching sunlight dance on the frost. Emma would talk. Luna would listen. It felt like friendship, though Emma knew better than to call it that aloud. "Dad says wild things can't be tamed," she said one afternoon, tossing a pine cone that Luna batted aside with her paw. "But I don't want to tame you. I just don't want you to be alone." The bobcat blinked, slow and soft, then brushed her head against Emma's shoulder. But back in town, the stories had started. First it was the missing chickens. Then someone's dog gone without a trace. People whispered about a predator roaming too close to their homes. Old Mrs. Carter swore she saw glowing eyes outside her barn. Hunters began setting traps again, iron jaws buried beneath the snow. One evening, Emma overheard her father talking in hushed tones by the fire with the sheriff. "They say it's a bobcat," the sheriff muttered. "Tracks near your property. You've still got that rifle?" Jacob nodded grimly. "I won't let it near my daughter." Emma's stomach twisted. She backed away before they saw her, heart pounding in her ears. That night she couldn't sleep. The image of Luna's paw caught in the first trap flashed in her mind like lightning. She couldn't let it happen again. Before dawn, she packed a small bag, rope, her flashlight, a piece of her mother's scarf. She crept into the woods, snow crunching softly under her boots. The forest felt heavier now, the cold biting deeper. When she reached the clearing, Luna was waiting. The bobcat paced restlessly, ears twitching as if she could sense the tension in Emma's chest. "They're coming for you," Emma whispered. "They think you're dangerous." Luna's tail flicked once, her gaze sharp. "I'll take you farther away, past the ridge. You'll be safe there." But as Emma stepped closer, Luna made a low sound. Not a growl, but something that stopped her in her tracks. It was almost warning. The wind shifted. A metallic scent cut through the air. Emma's breath caught. She looked down and saw the faint outline of another trap buried under the snow, just inches from her boots. Her heart jumped. She knelt carefully, brushing the snow aside, revealing cold iron teeth waiting to snap. Someone had set it recently. The steel was clean. Emma looked toward the trees, her pulse racing. Her father's footprints were among the others. Tears burned her eyes. "He doesn't understand," she said through clenched teeth. Luna stepped forward, pressing her nose against Emma's hand. In that moment, the fear dissolved, replaced by something fierce and protective. "I'll keep you safe," Emma whispered. "I swear it." Above them, the wind rose in a low moan that swept through the treetops. Snow spiraled down in wide, slow arcs. It felt like the forest itself had heard her promise and was holding its breath to see if she could keep it. By midwinter, the rumors had turned into fear. Hunters patrolled the woods with rifles slung over their shoulders, and Jacob began locking the doors earlier each night. The word bobcat became a curse in Hollow Creek, a ghost blamed for every missing animal and broken fence. But Emma knew the truth. Luna wasn't the monster they imagined. She was gentle, Cautious, wild, yes, but not cruel. Still, Emma could feel the forest changing. The stillness that once comforted her now felt watchful. The air carried the metallic tang of danger. Every time she slipped away to the cabin, she moved like a shadow, afraid of what might be following her. One afternoon, as she fed Luna a piece of jerky, the bobcat stiffened, her fur rising. Emma froze. A sharp sound cut through the wind, boots crunching on snow. She turned toward the door, her breath caught in her throat. The latch rattled once, twice. Then it burst open. Jacob stood in the doorway, rifle in hand, eyes wide with disbelief. "Emma?" Her heart stopped. "Dad!" He saw the animal beside her and raised the gun instinctively. "Get away from it!" "No!" she screamed, standing between them. "She's not dangerous." "Emma, move!" Luna growled low, stepping forward, her body shielding the girl. The sound was deep, primal, enough to send a chill down Jacob's spine. His finger hovered over the trigger. "Please," Emma begged, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She's hurt. She's been here for weeks. She's my friend." Jacob's face twisted, fear, anger, love, all tangled into something raw. You don't make friends with wild things. For a long moment, no one moved. The forest outside held its breath. Snow drifted through the doorway, slow as ash. Then, somewhere in the distance, a gunshot echoed. Another hunter, too close. Luna's ears flattened. She lunged instinctively, not at Jacob, but toward the sound, pushing Emma back out of harm's way. The sudden movement startled Jacob. His finger jerked on the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder. Luna yelped and collapsed into the snow. The world spun into silence. Emma screamed. She dropped beside the bobcat, hands shaking as she touched the wound, a graze across the shoulder, blood staining her coat. Jacob's rifle slipped from his grasp. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Emma, Go away!" she shouted, her voice breaking. "You did this!" He reached for her, but she turned her back, wrapping her arms around Luna's trembling body. "You're okay," she whispered through sobs. "I'm here. You're okay." Jacob stumbled backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The sight of his daughter, so small, so fierce, shattered something inside him. He lowered his head and stepped out into the falling snow, vanishing into the trees without another word. That night, Emma stayed in the cabin, feeding the fire with broken boards, whispering to Luna as the wind screamed outside. The bobcat's breathing slowed, her golden eyes half-lidded but calm. "Don't leave me," Emma murmured, pressing her forehead to Luna's. The animal's tail brushed against her wrist, weak but deliberate. It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. Outside, the storm raged on, snow swallowing the cabin in white. Inside, the firelight flickered against the girl's face, turning her tears to gold. By dawn, the wind had quieted, but something in Emma had changed forever. She wasn't afraid of the forest anymore. What she feared now was the world beyond it. The snow had turned to glass overnight, hard and glittering beneath a pale sun. The forest looked peaceful, too peaceful. Emma trudged through it with her coat pulled tight, her heart heavy as stone. It had been a week since the accident. A week since Jacob's shot echoed through the trees and shattered the fragile world she'd built with Luna. The bobcat had vanished after that night, disappearing into the wilderness without a trace. Emma searched every morning, following faint tracks that ended at the frozen creek, calling her name until her voice cracked. But the forest never answered. Her father hadn't either. Jacob barely spoke now. He repaired the fence, chopped wood, and stared at the tree line like it was a wound that wouldn't close. "Emma," he said one evening, his voice low. I did what I had to. It's over. But she shook her head. You don't understand. She trusted me. Jacob looked away, his eyes hollow. You can't trust wild things, sweetheart. They don't know what love means. The words cut deeper than he knew. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the wind clawing at the windows, the sound of the woods whispering her name. And somewhere in that darkness, a single thought rooted deep inside her chest. She's still out there. So before dawn, she packed a small lantern, a blanket, and her mother's silver whistle, the one she used to call Emma home from the fields. Then she slipped quietly into the trees. The forest greeted her with silence. Snow fell in thin sheets, catching the first light of morning. Her breath came out in small clouds as she followed the old trail toward the ridge. For hours, she found nothing. No tracks, no sign. Just the cold press of loneliness and the weight of guilt. Then, as she reached the clearing near the cabin, she saw movement. A flash of tawny fur between the trees. Her pulse quickened. Luna? She whispered. But when she stepped closer, her heart dropped. It wasn't Luna. It was a trap. And inside it, struggling, bleeding, was another bobcat, smaller, younger. Emma fell to her knees, panic flooding her chest. She tried to pry the trap open, but her fingers slipped on the frozen steel. The animal hissed in terror, its eyes wide. Hold on, she breathed, fighting the latch. I'll help you. A voice cut through the air behind her. Emma, step back. She turned. Jacob stood there, rifle in hand, his face pale with shock and fear. What are you doing? He shouted. That thing could kill you. It's not her, she cried. It's not Luna. But the words didn't matter. In that frozen instant, everything moved too fast. The young bobcat thrashed. The trap clanged shut again, and Jacob, reacting to movement, not reason, raised his gun. No, Emma screamed. She threw herself in front of the trap, arms wide. The shot split the air, but this time it missed. The sound echoed through the trees like thunder rolling over a grave. Jacob froze, horror in his eyes. Emma stared at him, trembling, tears cutting tracks down her cheeks. Do you see what fear does? She whispered. You're becoming the thing you're afraid of. She turned away before he could speak, her small figure swallowed by snow and silence. Behind her, Jacob lowered the rifle and sank to his knees. The sound of the wind howling through the forest, like a punishment neither of them could escape. By the next morning, word had spread across Hollow Creek. Someone had seen the bobcat again near the valley road. The hunters gathered at the tavern, boots stomping snow from their heels, rifles slung over their shoulders. They spoke in short, eager tones, the kind men use when fear disguises itself as courage. Jacob listened from the doorway, his face drawn and pale. He didn't tell them about Luna or the cabin or his daughter's secret. He only clenched his fists and stared at the frost creeping along the window pane. Meanwhile, Emma sat on the porch steps, the cold biting through her coat. She watched the men head toward the forest, toward her forest, and something inside her snapped. She stood, heart pounding, and ran before anyone could stop her. The trail wound deep into the woods. Snowflakes stung her face, but she didn't care. All she could think of was Luna, hurt, scared, alone. If the hunters found her first, it would all be over. Please, she whispered into the wind, let me find you first. Hours passed. The light dimmed. The air thickened with mist. Emma's legs ached, her fingers numb. Just when she thought she couldn't take another step, she saw a shape in the distance, familiar, graceful, moving between the trees. "Luna!" she cried, voice breaking. The bobcat turned. For a moment, time froze. Its fur was streaked with snow, one shoulder scarred where Jacob's bullet had grazed it. Its eyes met hers, those same golden eyes that once held trust and gentleness. Emma stepped closer. "It's me. You're safe now." But behind her came the sound she feared most, the crunch of boots, the metallic click of a rifle being readied. "Emma, move away!" a hunter shouted. She spun around. 3 men stood at the edge of the clearing, guns raised, her father among them. "No!" Emma cried. "Don't shoot!" "Get back, sweetheart," Jacob pleaded. "It's not safe. She's not dangerous." But the hunters didn't listen. Fear moved faster than reason. Luna tensed, crouched low, her tail twitching. She could sense the danger Emma couldn't. "Please!" Emma screamed again. "Don't!" Then the world erupted in chaos. One of the hunters slipped on the ice, his rifle firing by accident. The shot tore through the silence, hitting the tree beside Luna. The bobcat bolted, vanishing into the shadows. Emma ran after her, tears streaming down her face. "Luna!" Jacob called her name, chasing through the snow, but she was already gone, swallowed by the white wilderness. By the time he found her tracks, they ended at the frozen river. No prints beyond that point. Just wind and snow and silence. That night, the town declared the bobcat gone. Maybe dead, maybe fled. The hunters were relieved. The children were, warned never to wander near the woods again. But Emma knew better. She sat by her window long after everyone slept, eyes on the dark line of trees. Somewhere out there, she could feel Luna's presence, alive but distant, like a heartbeat just beyond reach. Her father came to the doorway, his voice soft and broken. "I was trying to protect you." Emma didn't turn. "Then why does it feel like you killed something that wasn't yours to fear?" Jacob didn't answer. He just stood there, the silence between them as heavy as the winter air. Outside, the snow kept falling, slow, endless, merciless. For days, Emma wandered through the forest like a ghost. The snow had begun to thaw, dripping from the branches in slow, heavy drops. But inside her, everything felt frozen. The hunters had stopped searching. Luna was gone, vanished without a trace. Some said she'd fallen through the ice on the river. Others said she'd been taken by wolves. No one knew, and no one cared enough to find out. But Emma couldn't let go. Each morning before dawn, she left the cabin while Jacob still slept, her small lantern cutting through the mist. She called Luna's name until her voice grew raw. Sometimes she thought she heard something calling back, a soft cry, an echo. But when she turned, it was only the wind. The forest felt different now, hollow, empty. Even the birds had gone quiet. One evening, Emma found herself standing at the old cabin again, the place where everything had begun. The door hung open, creaking in the wind. Inside, the fire pit was cold, the blankets stiff with frost. Her scarf still lay where she had left it weeks ago, now torn and half buried under snow. She sank to her knees beside it, the cold seeping into her bones. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have protected you." A sound answered her, so faint she almost missed it. A low, distant rumble that could have been thunder, or a growl. Emma froze. "Luna?" she whispered, her breath catching. Nothing, just the hiss of the wind through the rafters. She closed her eyes, clutching the scrap of scarf to her chest. Outside, footsteps crunched in the snow. She turned sharply, but it was only her father. He stood in the doorway, his face lined with exhaustion and regret. "Emma," he said softly, "you can't keep doing this." "She's still out there," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I can feel it." Jacob took a step forward. "Even if she is, she's wild, honey. That means she belongs to the forest, not to us." Tears burned behind her eyes. "She wasn't just wild. She saved me. She trusted me." Jacob's voice broke. "And I destroyed that." The confession hung between them, fragile as glass. For the first time, Emma saw the sorrow in his eyes. Not anger, not fear, but the kind of grief that had no place to go. He knelt beside her. "I wanted to keep you safe. But maybe I was the one who lost my way." They sat together in silence, the last light of day spilling through the broken roof. Snow drifted down like ash, soft and endless. As they turned to leave, Emma glanced once more into the forest and stopped. There, far beyond the tree line, a faint trail of paw prints dotted the snow. Fresh ones, small, steady, deliberate. Her breath hitched. Jacob followed her gaze. "Emma?" But she was already smiling through her tears. "She's alive," she whispered. And though the wind carried no answer, the trees seemed to sway, as if nodding in quiet agreement. The winter storm came without warning, angrier and louder than any before. It swallowed the mountains whole, turning the world white and wild. Wind screamed through the pines, ripping shingles from the roof of the cabin. The sky was a single color, gray, merciless, endless. Jacob bolted the door while Emma huddled by the fire, the glow flickering across her pale face. The storm howled like a living creature outside. Every window rattled under its breath. "It's getting worse," Jacob said, pacing. "If it keeps up, the bridge will flood by morning." Emma barely heard him. Her eyes were on the window, on the blackness beyond. Something about the wind, the pitch of it, the rhythm, made her chest ache. It wasn't just a storm, it felt like a call. When the lights flickered once, twice, then went out, Jacob cursed softly. "Stay here," he said, grabbing his coat. "I need to check the generator." "Don't," Emma whispered. "It's too dangerous." He forced a small smile. "I'll be 5 minutes." But when he stepped outside, the wind swallowed him whole. Minutes stretched like hours. The fire dimmed to embers. Emma pressed her palms to the window, heart pounding. The storm had devoured the yard. No tracks, no sound but the roar of the wind. "Dad!" she shouted. Her voice vanished into the howl. Fear clawed its way up her throat. She couldn't stay. She grabbed her lantern, threw on her coat, and pushed the door open. The wind hit her like a wall, tearing the breath from her lungs. Snow whipped across her face in sharp, blinding bursts. "Dad!" she screamed again. No answer. She stumbled forward, lantern flickering in her hand. The world was chaos, trees bending, snow flying, the sky a blur of motion. Her boots slipped on the ice as she pushed deeper into the storm, following the faint shadow of footprints that led toward the woods. When she found him, he was on his knees near the fallen generator, half buried in snow. His face was gray, his movements slow. "Dad!" She dropped beside him, shaking his shoulders. "You have to get up." He blinked weakly, his lips pale. "Go back. Can't see. Too cold." She tried to pull him, but the snow was too deep, the wind too strong. Panic burned through her chest. "Please." Then, from somewhere in the blinding white, came a sound she hadn't heard in weeks. A low, rising growl that cut clean through the wind. Emma froze. Through the wall of snow, 2 golden eyes appeared, steady, glowing, familiar. "Luna," she whispered. The bobcat stepped forward, her fur bristling with frost, her body lean and powerful now, no longer the fragile cub Emma had once rescued. She moved like smoke, silent and sure. Jacob's eyes widened in disbelief. "Is that—" Before he could finish, Luna darted past Emma, circling around them. Her movements were quick, deliberate. She nudged Jacob's shoulder with her head, then turned toward the forest, glancing back as if to say, "Follow me." Emma understood instantly. "She wants to lead us out." With the last of his strength, Jacob stood, leaning on Emma. Together, they followed the bobcat through the blizzard. Luna moved ahead of them, carving a path through the snow, her golden eyes never leaving Emma's. The storm raged harder, but wherever Luna stepped, the wind seemed to ease, the snow less brutal. It was as if the forest itself was parting for her. Jacob stumbled again, collapsing. Emma screamed his name, but Luna turned back, pressing her body against him, her fur shielding his face from the wind. Emma knelt beside them, tears freezing on her lashes. "Please don't stop," she begged. "We're almost there." Luna looked at her, eyes burning with something more than instinct, something that looked like will. Then she roared, a deep, fierce sound that cut through the storm like a heartbeat against death. Somehow, through that impossible cry, Emma found her strength again. She pulled Jacob's arm over her shoulder, and together they staggered toward the faint glow ahead. Home. Behind them, the storm screamed louder, but Luna's shadow never faltered. They barely made it halfway to the cabin before the wind turned violent again. The storm was alive now, howling, thrashing, tearing at the trees like it wanted to erase everything in its path. Emma struggled to keep her footing, half carrying Jacob, half dragging him through the snow. His body was cold, his breath shallow. The light from her lantern flickered and went out, swallowed by the storm. "Luna," she cried, "where are you?" The answer came in the form of movement, a flash of tawny fur against the blinding white. Luna was there, circling them, her body low, her ears pinned flat. She growled into the wind, defiant, as if warning the storm itself to stay back. Emma pressed closer to her father. His eyes fluttered open, glazed with exhaustion. "Emma, leave me, go." "No," she shouted over the roar. "You're not leaving me. Not again." A tree cracked nearby, snapping under the weight of ice. It fell toward them with a thunderous crash. Emma screamed, then Luna leapt. It happened in an instant. The bobcat threw herself against Emma and Jacob, knocking them sideways as the tree slammed into the ground where they had just been standing. Snow exploded around, them in a cloud of white. When the world stilled, Luna was sprawled in the snow beside them, panting hard. Her side was scraped and bleeding, but she stood, shaking, limping, unbroken. Emma reached for her, sobbing, "You saved us." Luna only blinked, her chest rising and falling, each breath a small act of defiance against the storm. She turned her head toward the cabin lights faintly glowing through the white blur ahead. "She's leading us home," Jacob whispered hoarsely. Together they stumbled forward again, Emma supporting her father, Luna leading the way. The snow came at them sideways, cutting across their faces, but every few steps, Luna looked back to make sure they were still behind her. Her eyes glowed like beacons. Then the wind shifted again, violent, sharp, and with it came a low growl that didn't belong to the storm. Emma froze. Out of the swirling snow, a pair of yellow eyes gleamed. A shadow moved, large, heavy, deliberate. A wolf, driven down from the mountains by hunger and cold. Luna turned instantly, her body tense, tail flicking. The wolf snarled, circling, the storm wrapping around the two predators like a curtain closing on the world. "No," Emma whispered, fear flooding her chest. "Luna, don't. Please don't." But Luna didn't move away. She stepped between Emma and the wolf, muscles coiled. Her growl rose from deep within her throat, a sound ancient and fierce. The wolf lunged. Luna met it head-on. The clash was a blur of snow and fur and sound. Emma screamed, clutching her father's coat. The wolf's jaws snapped. Luna's claws struck, both disappearing into the storm. For a heartbeat, Emma saw nothing but chaos, until the wolf staggered back, bleeding, retreating into the darkness. Luna stumbled forward, limping, her breath ragged. "Luna!" Emma dropped to her knees, reaching out. The bobcat pressed her head weakly against Emma's hand, leaving streaks of blood on her glove. Jacob knelt beside them, his voice shaking. "She's dying." "No," Emma whispered. "No, she's not." But even as she spoke, Luna's strength faltered. The bobcat looked at her one last time, eyes soft, knowing, and then turned her head toward the cabin's faint light. Emma followed her gaze. "She wants us to go," she whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "She's showing us the way." Jacob lifted Emma, and together they stumbled toward the light, following the small, uneven trail Luna had carved through the snow. When they reached the porch, Jacob collapsed against the door, fumbling to open it. Warmth spilled out. Emma turned back, just once. Through the curtain of snow, she saw Luna standing in the clearing, her silhouette trembling, haloed by the storm's silver light. Their eyes met one final time. Then Luna turned and vanished into the white. Emma's sob broke the night open. When the door slammed shut behind them, silence fell like a curtain. The storm still roared outside, but inside the cabin, only the sound of their breathing filled the air. Emma dropped to the floor beside Jacob, both shaking, covered in frost and snow. Jacob's lips were blue, his hands stiff. Emma tore a blanket from the cot and wrapped it around him, her fingers trembling. "You're okay," she whispered over and over. "We made it." He tried to speak but could only nod, eyes unfocused, searching for something she couldn't see. "The cat," he rasped. "Where's the cat?" Emma turned toward the window. The world outside was a blur of white, the storm's fury still thick. She pressed her palm against the glass, her breath fogging it. "She's out there," she said softly. "She's still fighting." Jacob's eyes filled with something between awe and shame. "That creature, it saved us." Emma looked at him, her voice small but steady. "No, Dad, she saved you." Hours passed in fragments. The wind eased, the fire grew bright again, and the world outside began to quiet. At some point, Jacob drifted into sleep beside the fire, his hand still gripping Emma's. She stayed awake, watching the window, waiting for a shadow she prayed would appear. When dawn came, the light was sharp and cold. The storm had broken. Everything was still. Emma pulled on her boots and stepped outside before Jacob could wake. The air was heavy with the clean scent of snow and pine. The forest glimmered in pale gold sunlight, each branch wearing a crown of frost. She followed the trail from the porch, her breath catching as she saw the prints, fresh paw marks, leading away from the cabin and into the trees. Small at first, then larger, the pattern steady. "Luna," she whispered, following them. The trail led her to the clearing, the place where the storm had nearly taken them. The snow there was disturbed, marked by struggle, but at the center, untouched, stood something she didn't expect. her red scarf. It was tied neatly around a fallen branch, fluttering faintly in the breeze. Not dropped, placed. Emma stepped closer, her throat tight. Beneath it, pressed into the snow, was a single paw print, perfect, deliberate, larger than before. The print shimmered faintly in the morning light, like it held the last breath of the storm. Emma sank to her knees. "You made it," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You really made it." A soft sound drifted through the forest, a low, familiar rumble, not close but not far either. She lifted her head, heart racing. At the edge of the trees, she saw her, Luna, standing in the golden light, her fur shining with frost and sunlight. The wound on her side was faint now, almost healed. Their eyes met across the snow. No words, no sound. Just that silent, perfect understanding. The kind that exists only between two souls who have already saved each other. Emma smiled through her tears. "Go," she whispered. "You're free." Luna tilted her head once, as if in farewell, then turned and slipped into the forest, her form fading into the trees. Emma stood there long after she was gone, the scarf fluttering in the quiet air, the sunlight warming her face. When she finally returned to the cabin, Jacob was waiting at the door. His eyes were wet. "She's alive?" he asked. Emma nodded. "She always was." He put a hand on her shoulder. "You were right about her." Emma looked toward the forest, her voice barely more than a breath. "No, I was wrong." Jacob frowned slightly. "Wrong? She wasn't here so I could save her," Emma said. "She came so I'd learn what it means to believe." Outside, the first thaw began, dripping, gentle, endless. The wild had given them mercy, and somewhere deep among the trees, a golden shadow watched over them still. Spring came slowly that year, as if the mountains themselves didn't want to let go of winter. The snow melted in silver threads, revealing the earth beneath, dark, soft, alive again. For the first time in months, Emma could hear the sound of the river, rushing strong and bright between the pines. The cabin no longer felt like a prison. Her father kept the windows open now, letting in light and air. He had started fixing the porch rail, singing under his breath again, an old tune Emma hadn't heard since her mother died. She sat on the steps most mornings, sketching in her notebook. The pages were filled with drawings of Luna, some from memory, others from dreams. Her pencil traced every line of the Bobcat's face, every curve of her fierce, kind eyes. Sometimes Jacob would stop his work and look over her shoulder. "She looks real," he'd say quietly. "She was," Emma would answer. "More real than most people ever are." He never argued. He didn't have to. They both knew what she meant. At night, Emma still dreamed of the forest, the blinding white of the storm, the warmth of fur beneath her hands, the sound of her own heartbeat matching another's. But the dreams weren't sad anymore. They were peaceful, like remembering a song instead of a loss. One morning, while gathering firewood near the edge of the woods, she found something strange. There, beside the path, was a single feather caught in the grass, white tipped with gold. She picked it up, twirling it between her fingers. When she looked up, she thought she saw movement at the tree line, a flicker of shadow and sunlight, the soft shape of something watching. Her breath caught. "Luna?" she whispered. Nothing. Just the rustle of leaves, the sound of water. But somehow she felt it, the same quiet warmth that had wrapped around her that night in the storm. Jacob came up behind her carrying an armful of logs. "You okay?" Emma nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, I just thought I saw something." He glanced toward the woods, then back at her. The forest is full of something, sweetheart. She slipped the feather into her pocket and walked beside him toward the cabin. Behind them, the wind stirred the trees. For a moment, sunlight broke through the clouds, falling across the clearing in long golden ribbons. And just beyond the light, a shadow moved. Small, graceful, gone before it could be real. Emma didn't turn. She didn't need to. Because deep down, she already knew. Some connections don't end when the world says they should. They only change shape, like seasons, like snow melting into rivers. It was late summer when Emma returned to the place where everything had begun. The forest looked different now, green and alive, full of the hum of insects and the whisper of wind through young leaves. The snow was gone, but she could still trace the memory of where it had been, the outlines of the old paths she once followed. She carried a small wooden plaque under her arm, carved carefully with a pocket knife. On it was a simple engraving, "Luna, the wild heart that saved us." The old hunting cabin still stood, half collapsed but sturdy enough to remember. Moss had crept over the roof. Flowers had grown through the cracks. Emma smiled softly, kneeling in the clearing where she had once built a fire to keep a frightened cub warm. "This was your home," she whispered. She dug into the soft earth with her hands, planting the plaque beneath a cluster of ferns. Around it, she placed smooth river stones she had collected along the way. It wasn't much, but it felt right. Jacob stood a few feet behind her, silent, watching. The years had softened him. His hair had turned silver at the edges, but his eyes were gentler now. He placed a small leather pouch beside the plaque. "She deserves that," he said quietly. "It was your mother's." Emma blinked, surprised. "The charm pouch?" He nodded. "She used to say it protected the ones you love." They stood there together, the forest breathing around them. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, falling across the wooden marker like a blessing. "Do you ever think she was more than just an animal?" Jacob asked after a moment. Emma smiled faintly, brushing dirt from her fingers. "Sometimes I think she was everything we needed her to be." A breeze stirred the leaves, soft and low. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called, a sharp, melodic sound that carried through the valley. Emma closed her eyes and listened. For a moment, she could almost hear the echo of a purr beneath the wind, the rhythmic sound that once lulled her to sleep in the darkest nights. When she opened her eyes again, something caught her attention, a flash of movement beyond the trees. She rose slowly, squinting through the light. There, for just an instant, she saw her. Luna, standing at the edge of the woods, half in shadow, half in sun. Her fur shimmered gold under the leaves. Emma's heart leapt. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Luna looked at her for a long, quiet moment, eyes calm and knowing. Then, with the grace of a memory slipping back into the wild, she turned and vanished into the forest. Emma stood there long after she was gone, tears sliding down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't from grief. They were from understanding. Jacob put a hand on her shoulder. "You saw her, didn't you?" Emma smiled through her tears. "Maybe I always will." As they walked back toward the trail, the wind swept through the clearing, carrying the sound of leaves rustling. A whisper, soft and clear. If you listened closely, it almost sounded like a voice saying goodbye. Years passed, as gently as the wind through the trees. The world moved on, but Emma never left Hollow Creek. She grew taller, stronger, her eyes carrying the same quiet depth as the forest she'd once feared. By the time she turned 18, people in town called her the girl of the woods. She worked with the rangers, helping injured animals, tracking migration paths, teaching children how to listen to nature instead of fearing it. And every time she stepped beneath the canopy of pines, she felt the same pulse, the same wild heartbeat that had guided her since that winter night. Sometimes, when the sun slanted through the branches just right, she would stop and whisper, "Hey, Luna." No answer ever came, yet somehow she always felt heard. At the ranger's cabin, a faded sketch hung on the wall, a portrait of a bobcat with golden eyes. Beneath it, a note written in careful handwriting read, "The one who reminded me that wild doesn't mean alone." One evening, after a long patrol, Emma sat by the river where the snow used to fall thickest. The water ran clear now, carrying pieces of sky on its surface. She threw a stone, watched the ripples stretch wide and fade. Her father joined her quietly, older now, walking slower but smiling more often. He handed her a thermos of tea, the same cinnamon blend her mother once loved. "You still come here every week?" he said, sitting beside her. Emma nodded. "It's where everything started." Jacob took a sip of tea and looked across the water. "I used to think the forest took too much from us," he said. "Now I think it gave us everything we were missing." Emma smiled softly. "It taught us how to listen again." They sat in silence, the sound of water filling the spaces between words. Across the river, a deer stepped out from the trees, ears twitching. It looked at them, calm and unafraid. "Do you think she's still out there?" Jacob asked. Emma watched the deer melt back into the forest. "I think she's everywhere," she said. "In the wind, the river, the way the trees bend when the storm comes." She paused, smiling faintly. "And maybe in me, too." As the sun dipped behind the mountains, the world turned to gold. Emma stood, brushing dirt from her hands. The forest glowed around her, alive and endless. Jacob watched her, pride and sorrow mingling in his eyes. "You know," he said, "you remind me of her sometimes." Emma turned, her hair catching the light. "That's because she never really left." The wind rose, gentle and warm, carrying the scent of pine and rain. Somewhere deep in the woods, a low sound echoed, a rumble so faint it could have been thunder, or a purr. Emma smiled. "Good night, Luna," she whispered. And as she walked back toward the fading light, the forest seemed to bow in quiet farewell. Years later, people would come from all over to hear Emma speak. They called her the woman who listens to the wild. She would stand on small wooden stages in schools and ranger halls, telling stories about the forest, about fear and about a friendship no one believed could be real. But when they asked her how it began, how a frightened little girl survived a storm with a wild bobcat, she never started with the night or the snow. She started with the silence. The silence, she would say, wasn't empty. It was waiting. She'd talk about Luna, not as a pet, not as a legend, but as a presence, a mirror. "She didn't need words to speak," Emma would tell them. "She showed me what trust looks like when it has no reason to exist, what love feels like when it expects nothing back." Sometimes her voice would tremble when she reached the end of the story, when she spoke about the storm, about how the wild thing everyone feared turned out to be the one who saved them all. And always, she would finish with the same thought. "You can't truly save the wild," she'd say softly. "You can only love it enough to let it save you." Those words lingered long after she left the stage. At night, when she returned home, she still lived near the edge of the forest, the same forest that once tried to take everything from her. Her house stood where her father's cabin used to be, rebuilt stronger, surrounded by trees that had grown tall since that winter. Sometimes she would walk into the woods alone, carrying a cup of tea and her sketchbook. She would stop by the old clearing, where sunlight still fell through the canopy in long golden streams. The wooden plaque was still there, half hidden by moss, the carving faint but visible. She'd kneel, brush away the leaves, and whisper, "I kept my promise." Then, as the wind rustled through the branches, she'd close her eyes, and in that quiet, always without fail, she would feel it. A warmth brushing against her skin, the faint, rhythmic sound of breath, the pulse of something vast and kind, older than time itself. Emma would smile, lift her face to the sky, and whisper one last truth to the trees, to the earth, to whatever heart might still be listening. Sometimes, the wildest hearts teach us the gentlest truths. The wind would rise, soft and steady, carrying her words deep into the forest. And if you listened closely, you could almost hear the echo of a purr beneath it.